welcome to Century Guild Salon. I'm Kat Handler. I am so excited for another evening with everybody tonight. We're going to be talking about a very helpful topic, which is, well, first of all, we're hosting a special Q&A with Century Guild founder Thomas Negovan, and he's going to be giving some insight into building and nurturing creative relationships. So this is a topic I'm often discussing with him that I find super helpful, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing your questions and comments. So without further ado, hi.
Hi, Kat.
There he is. I can hear you.
That was a trick. I was mouthing the words.
Are we pantomiming accidentally muting now?
I always wonder when we do these live things, how many people are actually there at the moment it starts versus, 2 minutes in.
Well, the beautiful thing about the salon is that whether you're tuning in live or you're watching it after the fact, there's something for everybody. But the good thing about tuning in live is, of course, you can join the discussion. And so thank you to those of you who are here right now.
So, Kat.
Tom. So, okay, we are talking tonight about building and nurturing creative relationships. And so before we get too deep into that, I just wanted to qualify what we mean by relationship building in this case, because oftentimes we hear about networking and the more professional sphere of relationship building. But after observing you for so long and seeing you develop these amazing relationships, I feel like you have such an all-encompassing experience with that, whether it's the personal versus the creative versus the more business. And so I wanted to, I suppose, qualify what we're talking about here when it comes to relationship building and how we're discussing it maybe beyond marketing or networking.
Well, I think that, when people, I think generally when people think about networking, there's kind of a business connotation to it. And I think one of the things that has been true for me or proven to be true is that the business relationships are very separate from the act of creation itself. And so when you're getting into a networking space, there's a lot that you said there, and I'm trying to make some of it succinct. I think that the simplest way that I could put it is just that it's like this idea of how, everyone works all the time. And there's that idea, especially if you're a creative person or an entrepreneur, you can't take a minute off because it's a race. You're constantly running ahead. Mm-hmm. And the older I get, the more that I recognize that the times when I paused had immense value. And I can't say that I did that. There were decades where I didn't take a vacation, things like that. But I did find solace in a book or in, an interaction with nature or something. And so I think the thing that I'm trying to get to with this is that the reason I mentioned that is because I feel like we have to look at the relationships with other creatives in that way, that it is like a good book or a walk through nature or something that I feel like this is one of those moments where if you told me that question in advance, I could have thought of a more succinct answer that would be less convoluted than this. But I think that the two things that are just battling in my head are that there is a value to networking. There is a value to when you're talking to people and everybody's looking for ways to bring their things into the world, and everybody's looking for ways to build new creative relationships. And sometimes the relationships are just business and all of that. But the thing that I wanted to talk about tonight was much, much earlier in that chain, which is the idea that The thing that is really the most important thing in the world, in our lives, is the journey and the experience of creativity. And that whether or not you ever achieve financial or commercial success, to me, that's not the measure of any artist's value. Um, and it's kind of that age-old argument of, I could make a better movie than that, or I could have painted that better, or, and the thing is that what catches fire in the world, um, is generally aimed towards the lowest common denominator. And I don't mean that things that are successful can't be extraordinary, but it is the idea that if you can get a huge consensus of people to agree that something is good across all walks of life, it's generally a very unsophisticated opinion. And I think about how you get bands like the Velvet Underground is always a great example, where there's jokes about their first show, only 10 people showed up, but every one of those people in the crowd went on to form a band. And that there are so many artists, like Nick Drake is a great example, like probably the quintessential singer-songwriter, and never achieved any success in his lifetime of note, of commercial note. But I can't think of any musician that I've met that doesn't lose their mind over the concept of Nick Drake. Like, you don't bring him up and people say, yeah, he's okay. Like, he comes up and people light up. So I think it's important for anyone that's creative, and I'm sure someone who's older is going to say, yeah, we've heard this before, but especially if someone's younger, to think about it really isn't about the commercial success. It is about the quality of your ability to take what's inside and get it outside. And so, leading now back to your question with that preface, the separation from that in networking is that art doesn't exist in a vacuum. If you are a singer-songwriter with an acoustic guitar, you want to work perhaps with an arranger or a producer. If you're a painter, conceptually, there are intense values to having salon environments where perhaps you and 5 or 6 people you respect are bouncing ideas off of each other, and that works its way onto its canvas, onto, the painter's canvas. So I think that the thing that's in contrast to that, I think about, there was a comic artist who I really liked, and I mentioned to Doug Klauba once, yeah, he seems a little strange. And Doug said, and that Doug is a painter, if anyone isn't familiar with his work. Doug said, and this is, God, we were, late teens when we had this conversation, or early 20s. He said, yeah, because we're at our drawing board all day. And he was commiserating with this other artist in that moment, saying, yeah, we're not the most social of people. Like, sometimes talking to another person can be a little awkward or weird.
Mhm.
And that was long before I had a gallery and was representing artists and things like that. But that conversation always stuck with me, to remember that I make this joke with Gail Pataki all the time, that English is her second language. And it started as a joke if she made a grammatical error or something, but the joke was because painting is her first language. And so I just think it's important to remember that. And I see it all the time, where I'm working with creative people that are really genuinely good people, really talented people, and they'll be butting heads on something. And in every case, it's literally, it's just a lack of communication.
Mhm.
And so I've had this come up with 2 really major incidents in my past 2 weeks. So when we were kind of brainstorming on what we should talk about tonight, I thought, this is a really good thing. This is a really important thing. because in both of these cases, the two parties that are involved are extraordinary people. And it's just different people have their different thing.
So would you say, I mean, it part of what you're saying kind of sounds like that age-old idea of, sometimes creative people can, have, and you actually mentioned this, I'm trying to paraphrase it and do it justice, but you mentioned it can be such an isolative craft, and then on top of it, if you're extremely creative and maybe not so versed in the business side of it, that could potentially make it more difficult when it comes to
not even the business side. I think it's that the act of creation unto itself is a very solitary experience.
Mhm.
Because even if you're in a theater group or in a band or part of some kind of consortium, the work really takes place inside our head, inside our heart. And so it's not a business creative thing, although that's a whole other conversation. It really is the idea that people, especially now, their heads locked into their computers, their heads, I mean, I'm trying to think of ways to make this a little bit universal, but I think that the thing, like, especially with some of the things I'm working on now, you're getting people that are up all night working on an edit or working on something, and uh, they may not speak to another human being for 8 hours or so. You know what I mean? Like, I think about all the time with me, um, how much I used to forget to eat or drink water or just
Mhm.
do anything. And oh my God, there's a Lily Allen song where she starts. I may not, like, I don't know much, but I know this for certain. That is the sun poking its head round the curtains. And I think that every time when I go to bed and the sun is coming up, and I'm laughing at myself thinking, I failed again in getting to bed at a reasonable hour. But so the point is, like, those solitary hours where you get the work done. So the main thing is, I think that, like, I can certainly speak in a general sense, but if anyone that's watching is a creative person, um, that is trying to figure out how to better interact with people in their creative space, this would be a great thing to put in the Q&A. One of the things I can speak about before we get to it is that I think being solution minded and seeking clarity are what really the two keys are. Everything really does come down to that. And so, um, in, and it's something that I've seen countless times where you do have a uh, scenario where artists are really good at their filters becoming part of their body of work. And you see it with all fields of art. Like, it's kind of like how if you look at a painting by, I'll use Gail as an example. If she paints a tree, the tree is going to look like it's from a haunted forest. It's just what her lens is.
Mhm.
So the question is, how do we keep that as an artist, but find ways to remove it when we're dealing with other human beings?
Mm.
Um, and Chandra said there is a question here from, I think,
Believe, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but I believe this is Deshazia. Welcome back. An artist, when given an idea to create, as an artist, when given an idea to create, an artist will see the image in their style and wisdom earned. When asked then to change aspects of it, it's frustrating because then it loses the magic of the initial mental design.
my question to that would be, well, who's telling you to change aspects of it?
Hmm.
And you can respond, but in the meantime, I'll kind of address there's two sides of it. One is it a client? If it's a client, then, you know, there is, speaking of magic, there is an exchange there. You're taking funds to fuel your life, and you're exchanging part of your creative energy to manifest something that they're seeing. So that's another thing that I've experienced. Okay, so it is a client. So one of the hardest things that I have seen people experience with clients is that, and also with my experiences, but, you know, also observing it, is that you'll get people that can't really articulate what they want. And then they just say, just do your thing. Then you do your thing. And then they say, well, that's not quite it. So that's a whole other conversation about clarity from a client to an artist. But the things that you can do are asking questions that do give clarity and boundaries to the art, so that what creates a success is a little more clearly defined. And then the other part of it is, you know, when, like, Brian Eno believes that the demo version of everything, that the first take of everything is always the best one. And so he will try to work, even if it's like a weird cassette recording, he'll put it in and try to build off of that. And so you may have a band like U2 or someone, and he'll still, if there's a rough, raw demo, he'll try to work that in. So I do also understand what you're saying, and I do agree with that there is a, you know, there is kind of a primordial connection. And then the challenge, and I think this is where the craft comes in, is how do you then hone it without shaving away so much that the structure falls apart? An artist that I should mention that I've seen really, really beautifully do well with this is Dave Mckean. I mention him specifically just because he's got such a strong vision and such a singular vision that I could see where someone like him would be taking notes from someone and immediately be frustrated that it's pulling it a different way. But part of that is where if you're taking money from someone, then it does become a collaboration. And so part of your decision that an artist has to make is this someone I want to collaborate with? So for example, if, you know, if it's a company and they have a political stance that completely opposes everything you believe in, and they're asking you for something that to you has a spiritual element, you may be setting yourself up for conflict. Something that I feel really fortunate that I've been able to work towards, but it was not always the case, is that I do really try to find as many problems up front as I can. And that might be something then that helps. Because I've certainly worked with a lot of people against my better judgment, and then later said, oh man, I knew it was going to happen. But it was times when I needed, like, as every artist is going to tell you, there were times when I needed the money. You know, like you had to take the job and it might have not felt right, but then there was a struggle. And so have I ever worked with an artist that I connected fully with and almost never have to give him any notes? I would say that I'm doing that a lot lately. As far as I mean, I'll mention these two people just because I'm working on something right now with Dave Mckean and with a musician named Troy Sterling Nies. I never say his name. Nies. And the reason that I asked the two of them to be involved is because I've worked with them enough that I just know that what they do is so intuitively close to what I would do if I could do what they do. Um, David Mack is another one I just need to put an asterisk on and just say that he's someone that I've hired for a few things for like pre-production things, and he's really impressed me. But I would say in terms of the thing about not having to give notes, you know, and I'll mention this again, you know, Dave is someone that um, when you I've if I've said to him, hey, maybe try this way, it's you know, he could have easily said, but that's not what I want to do, or that's not what I'm visualizing, or any of that. And so the reason that I'm complimenting him in the professionalism is that uh, he made it really easy for me to say, look, I'm a fan. I love what you do. This kind of thing is more what I was hoping for. Um, and he then ran with it, and then it was outstanding and really cool. He's just a great, he's a good man. He's a good man and a really, really brilliant artist. He's fantastic. And you know, it's funny. Someone just said I dig David Mack. Just read some Kabuki again recently. Uh, I only read the Alchemy book. That was he gave that to me, and I think he thought that I had read the ones before that, and I came in on that one and told him how much I loved it. And when he found out that I hadn't read anything before that, he was really surprised that I connected so well with it coming in at that odd point. I think it's just a testament to who he is as a storyteller that it did that. But I do have to be honest that I did not go back and read the rest of it. But anyway.
So communication is such a huge part of a successful network, or not, I don't want to use the word network, but a successful garden of creative relationships. And so it sounds like the examples you gave are almost the absence of ego. You know, it's such a healthy collaborative dialogue.
Well, that's the thing is you like the ego has to completely step out of it on both sides. Like that's the other thing is that the challenges that I've had with people, like I did, you know, I had a problem recently with someone whose position was that the client can jump off a short pier. And it's like you can't take their money and have such a big ego that the idea is that they're funding your dream. And that does come back into the magic and it does come back into the metaphysics. Like, what's the exchange? The exchange can't be that you're just so fabulous. Like that's that's a detachment from communication. And I think it's important. I mean, this is a whole other thing about I really think that business people need to respect artists more, but I also think that artists have to respect the business side more. And I feel really lucky that I've been able to operate in both realms because I can so easily see where the trap exists in disrespecting the other side. And even more so than how those kind of polarize into opposite directions. Because then the client gets the attitude, well, I have the money. It's like, but you don't have the creativity. And then the creative says, well, you can't do what I do. And it's like, yeah, but you want their transactional energy. And the thing that diffuses all of that is respect and communication. What's the goal? And people will constantly distort the goal in their heads to fit their preconceived narrative. If their ego is, I'm what's important, they'll find a way to shift it into that. And if you find yourself having to do that, well, then that's probably not positive or productive creative relationship. You definitely want to, it's like gift of the magi. When you've got a situation where everybody's willing to kind of back off a little bit, then whatever it is that's been in the table, everybody gets a little different perspective on it. And if it's based in love, if it's based in respect and enthusiasm and a real love for art being an act of communication, then I feel like it's easier for people to not fall into their own ego traps. That's a whole other conversation, because the ego traps, like, I can't tell you how many times on either the business or the art side, that people who are otherwise extraordinarily reasonable feel threatened in some way, and then it affects the way they interact.
That's actually something that came to mind, and I'm sorry to cut you off. It's just something that I've observed you having such a honed skill with. And I'll just share.
So complimentary, but thank you.
No, I'm saying it because I want people to sort of feel free to ask questions in this regard, especially. But I've noticed that you have this fearlessness in your creative relationships, and it comes across as generosity a lot of the time. Like, whether it's with your time, your friendship in those kinds of situations, or you just do a favor for somebody who's an artist. But there's never any fear that I'm going to get screwed over here. This person's going to take advantage of me. And like you were saying, that ego oftentimes can just be a fear that's just being.
Well, I believe in abundance. And there are vast portions of my life where that has not been true financially. But what's the most important currency? The most important currency is relationships. It's human beings. It's and so I think that I just finished Michael's book. This is getting released tomorrow. And it was 3 weeks of solid work, and I did it as a favor for him because we're friends and I love him and I want him to succeed. And it's just like that idea of, what is it? What are you left with at the end of the day? It's the art, it's the relationships, really, like, I don't even want to miss. I said it in that way because I don't mean for art to be first, because I would rather have good relationships and no art than a bunch of art and failed relationships. But I just buy into that idea personally, that if everybody just gave everything they could, and the first thing you have to learn is how to not overextend. But if you can learn how to not overextend and you just try to give as much as you can and live in that space, as long as you're interacting with people that, like, there are times when people ask me for a favor or want an interaction or something, and I can't do it. But the reason I just try to do that all the time is I believe that if you do that, it'll come back to you. And also, and it's also important when I mention about, like, kind of the self-care part, it's important to not just be a giver, because you don't want to get taken advantage of consistently, so you have to just kind of figure out, like, one of the things that I learned, there was a time when we were having a cash flow problem. And there were a couple there were 3 people that I was supposed to pay after an exhibition. And something happened with a client and money didn't come through and it just wound up messing up. But so I contacted these 3 people and I said, I'm going to be a couple weeks late on paying you. And this is embarrassing, but this is the situation that we're in. And I wanted to be upfront with you immediately. 2 of the people I had a longer relationship with and had done a lot of favors for. And they were vicious about not getting their money. And then the 3rd person I had never done business with before, and I had sold a bunch of their merchandise. I wrote them to tell them that I couldn't pay them. And their response to me was, do you need us to send you more product to sell to get you through this next couple weeks? So that 3rd person was Malleus, the poster artists. Because of that interaction, I've got them every job I possibly could. I've hired them for everything that I could. And I am happy to check in with them every few months to see how they are just as human beings. And then the other people I never worked with again, because I learned all the years of me doing favors didn't amount to any currency in the bank when it came time to them getting their money. So I'm saying that just as a preface, because I don't want people to feel like I'm preaching this peace and love thing that isn't based in reality. It is okay sometimes to give people a little bit of space and watch how they operate. Do they seem like they're in that zone too? Are they in a mindset where they're trying to be of service? And my suggestion, what's worked for me, is if you can tell that they're in that service mindset, then yeah, you just help them push the car off the road as much, or back onto the road, off the road, wherever it needs to go. We just do it for each other.
Right.
Have I always been good at being someone to collaborate with, or is this a skill that was learned in life? I think that I'm sure when I was younger that I had all kinds of crazy issues, and being difficult in my own way. I will say this. I remember one story. I must have been, I don't know, 10 years old or something. And I was at my friend's house and he'd left his toys all over the floor. And the mom said, if you don't pick them up, I'm going to throw them away. And he didn't pick them up. And then she came in to scoop them up to throw them away. And this kid was screaming and bawling and like, I'll never forgive you. And I just remember interrupting the mother from what she was doing and saying, listen, if you do this, he's not going to understand the message, the lesson that you were trying to introduce to him. He's just going to be angry with you and not understand why. And I forget how else I said it, but the point is I was articulating that, like, no, this is a lost cause. The lesson you want him to learn is not going to stick. He's just going to be resentful. You should reapproach this a different way. And I don't remember exactly what I said, but I will never forget what she said. She stopped what she was doing. She said, you're right. You're weird. You need to go home now. You're right. This is strange. I think that might have been it. You're right. This is strange. You need to go home now.
Oh my God.
I was never invited back to that house. So wow. I feel like, the idea of communication has always been something that I've been tuned into. But I think all the time, I don't think I got my act together emotionally until maybe when I was like in my early 40s. Like I was doing the best I could. I really was. I was absolutely doing everything that I could to be the best person that I could be. But, I was constantly, when I look back, I'm constantly embarrassed at ways that I might have failed in addressing something. And I'm sure there will be more tomorrow, but maybe that's just it, is that I think that when I was younger, like, especially when I was in my 20s, my agenda was less, I guess it is the fear thing. You know, you're not comfortable. Like now that I'm really comfortable in my taste and in my vision, I feel like I'm really easy to work with because I know what's good according to my criteria.
Mm-hmm.
And if someone doesn't agree with me, I can have a discussion about kind of where we're coming from. And I'm open to my mind being changed. You know, like I'm very comfortable in an argument. I'm very comfortable in a heated discussion about something. Um, and I'm also very comfortable saying the words, your idea is better. You know, I changed my mind. I've no problem saying I changed my mind. I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. That goes back to a thing. I remember these two musicians that I knew. One of them didn't like this other guy that I was friends with. And the guy was a little bit older and was the manager of a music store. And he said, I said, why don't you like this guy? And he said, well, did you notice how every time you ask him a question, he's got an answer? And I said, yeah. He said, that's why I don't like him. And he said, because he's not always right. And he'll answer about things he doesn't know about.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't old enough to have the perspective that these two older people did, which is that this other guy might have been right, which is that he knew that some of the things the guy was talking about might not be as correct. And
So
that just put me into a mindset of being like, yeah, you don't need to, there's no prestige in being the guy that always knows an answer.
mm-hmm.
There's prestige in having your right answers for the areas that you understand. And then there's prestige in saying, no, I don't know. I'm not the guy to ask about this, because it's self-awareness, which is way more important than ego, in my opinion.
So would you then suggest it's just as important to take that solitary time developing those principles like humility and um, healthy self-assuredness?
I mean, I am the humblest, I'm the best humble person you're ever going to meet, is the way that I like to look at it.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, the answer is that and this comes back to why I wrote the Le Pater book, is that I think that there's a big difference between an unhealthy ego and being confident. You know, I feel very confident, but I also, you know, it's the humility that I have comes from, look at the vastness of what's been created. Like, what are we in the face of that? They're virtually non-existent. So if you remove that, if you remove the idea that there's any kind of eternity attached to what you create, well, then what are you left with? You're left with the experience. So if you have a really terrible experience and the art ultimately is going to dissipate, then what alchemy took place there? Nothing. Like it's literally, to me, less than nothing. Which is kind of, I thought a quote earlier in, like, this is a great thing. What do you do when you want to work with an artist that is truly a chaotic human? I've done that. And I did it at times when someone asked me, I was asking a friend of mine, should I work with this person? And the person I asked this question is Christopher Ulrich, who is a painter and very, very beautiful human being. And he said, you just have to distill it to one question. How do you feel about the art? And I said, well, the art's good. The art's extraordinary. And he said, well, then you should do it. I'm going to disagree with that now. So at the time, I loved that he said that.
Mhm.
But I believe now that who you work with, it's almost like ripples in a pond, kind of.
Mhm.
And so at this point in my life, I can't say that I always did this, so I cast no judgment on anyone that has a different mindset right now. I need people to be really good people. I need them to be people that can be selfless, and I need them to be people that um, care about my well-being emotionally. Um, and I feel like the thing that turned it for me was becoming a father and thinking about what am I modeling for my son? Well, why are you working with this person? Well, they're horrible. Well, but I like what they do. But what they do is this. Well, no, but the art is this. But they're doing this to other humans or to their world or
Mhm.
and I would be heartbroken if I saw my son uh caught in that. And so I thought, well, then why am I doing it? And the answer is, well, like I'm strong enough to weather it but like in service of what? Like I want anything that I do to have a tenfold reward for someone else. And if you're putting in like one iota of energy and then it leaks out through someone's chaos, and what's left is just a fragment of that, all you're doing is fueling their illness. And so my suggestion would be is that if you and I'm not talking about when people say, oh, that's a toxic person or that. Like that could be a communication thing. But when you're really experiencing, and I've had this happen multiple times, where you're experiencing something that you can observe and you're aware that this person is through their actions, not their words, through their actions manifesting chaos. Because that's another thing is that, I've fallen for the story numerous times, which is that someone just hasn't had the right champion or the right person to work with or the right help. And that if they just had that, everything would be okay. But if you look and there's a trail of bodies in their wake, like, well, that's kind of your evidence. So I would say instead of listening to what someone is saying is look at their human relationships, you know? What's their relationship like with their, what have their creative relationships been like? Uh, I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole, but yeah, I'm really good at rabbit holes. I will way down.
Well, it also just, I'll say one quick thing on that. It speaks to that idea of the experience. Why have a miserable experience?
Yeah. There was one guy that I was working with, and someone came up to me at a show and said, wow, that guy's a huge pain, isn't he? And I said, no, he's actually been easy to deal with. And the guy was like, well, good luck. Well, then as soon as the relationship went sideways, I thought that's what the guy was talking about. And there are other people where when I've stopped working with them, people come out of the woodwork with horror stories. And I think, well, why didn't anyone tell me this before?
Mhm.
But I have to own it and say, if I had not looked at the art and not listened to what they were saying, but just kind of looked at the landscape, it's like, yeah, the landscape's got a lot of corpses in it,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yes, so I do choose um, to engage as little as possible with people that are chaos creators. And you know and even I guess the other thing I'll say about it is like everybody has chaos, everybody has bad days, everybody has that stuff. So someone is romancing being in that state, like you're in quicksand. So if you find people that are trying to look for ways to build better, healthier relationships, trying to solve problems, trying to be of service, trying to do those things, then when you do hit a bump or you do hit one of those problems, you've kind of got someone that you can lean on a little bit and work things out in a way that's productive for the creation, for the art, for the client if there is one, but ultimately for the journey. It's a good relationship.
I think that's a beautiful reminder. And I want to just say, I'm just going to go out on a limb and say that when it comes to my experience with personal development and transcending challenges and all of that, I have experienced so much grace and love from people around me. And at the time, I didn't think it was okay to say, I'm having a hard time with this. And I found it so easy to isolate in it and fester in the challenges that I was encountering. And I think that if I could impart anything personally from my experience, it's just having a community, even if you're not somebody who is, quote, extroverted, having a community, even of just a few people who are trustworthy and loving, and being able to say, God, I'm really struggling right now. Can you help me with this? Be patient with me with this. Can you maybe show me a better way to do this? That has been invaluable because the more I have worked to transcend some of my own personal challenges, I see the byproduct of that happening somewhere completely different in my life in a positive way. And so anyway, I wanted to just share that. It's okay to have a vulnerability. It's not all about, would you like to see my work? It's just, we're all humans. Society is just.
Are we, Kat?
We just made all this up, you guys.
I don't know if we're giving any practical advice or not, but we're having a good time talking, I suppose.
I just want to encourage everyone, once again, thank you for your comments and feel free to continue asking questions.
Most people don't comment. We've noticed most people are here silently. Another thing that I can say about the creative, wait, hold on. Maybe there's another thing that I can say about what's worked for me with creative relationships is, this is just kind of a weird little small thing, but I just thought of this because of when we talk about people being givers or takers or things like that, is that, sometimes if you're feeling like you need to dump something on someone, meaning, I'm having a hard time with this, I want to share this, if you have their home address, order a book for them that you think they'd like. I've just found that I think one of the reasons that I started trying to give as much as I do is because I had a really hard time asking for help. And the thing that kind of opened it up for me is I thought, well, I'm the kind of person that if someone asked me for help, I'd want to help them. But I was always really, really afraid to do it. I was afraid to say, I'm having troubles with this or this or this, whether it was financial or creative or anything. And so one of the things that helped me unlock that was trying to find ways to kind of escalate that in terms of manifesting like a physical service, meaning maybe I call someone and I say, hey, I really need advice on this. And if it's someone that you don't have a long relationship with, sometimes, sending them a book or a meal or something is just kind of a small way to show gratitude. The thing that made me think of it is that, in a really sweet way, someone had done that for me recently. And so it just popped up in my head, and it was like, I was grateful to be of help, but it was just one of those things like, man, kind of like the thing with Malleus, Nobody does that. No one sends nice notes. Like people just don't do that. They write you when they need something or when they want to complain about something, but just to send notes like that are really sincere, like this is what I'm thinking and feeling. Thank you. I feel like that's the way for me to not feel like I'm a drain on my ecosystem is looking for ways to be of service. And
Watering the garden.
What'd you say?
You're
watering the garden. Right. Yeah.
Looking for places to nourish others.
Yeah. And I also, I love when people are super transparent about it too. Like I'll joke about this, like it happens with Doug Klauba all the time. One of the reasons I love our relationship is that he'll call and we'll talk about movies or whatever, but he'll also call and barely say, how are you? And he's like, yeah, I got a question for you. How would you do this? And if I'm in the middle of something, I can say, well, I would just do this. And he's like, okay, great. You good? I'm like, yeah, I'm good. He's like, I'll talk to you later. And that's awesome. I love that. I love that because it's just like we're literally there for each other, and vice versa. I can do it with him. If it's like, hey man, can you sketch something for me? When do you need it? I kind of need it today. Really today? Because I'm really busy. I'm like, yeah, really today. He's like, all right, I'll do it. It's fun. It's just, we are all, anyone that's involved in collaborative stuff, it's play. You know what I mean? Like that's another thing too that I feel like when we start to get into our ego boxes and we start not communicating, it's like, well, are we playing? Are we having fun? Why even doing it then? Very few of us.
The experience is not good.
What'd you say?
If the experience is not good, right?
Yeah, very few of us, if any, are getting rich off of anything. So it's like if you're not having fun, then why do it? Mm-hmm. My favorite collaborative experience, and then the Sandman Netflix show. I'm going to say this about Netflix. One thing that I really, really wish everybody could understand is that if you're writing a story, it's you and maybe an editor and a publisher. Then if you're making a comic, well, now you're adding artists into it. So it gets bigger. The boat keeps getting bigger. And whenever you're making a film or a television show, these boats are enormous. And so the financial requirements of success attached to any of these creative things, it's never what people think it is. Like whether it's Sandman or any of these TV shows or movies, when I hear people in groups complaining about what they would have done or why people did what they did, it's like it's almost never right from what I know from the things I've seen behind the scenes. And so that being said, I was not as fond of the Sandman as other things that I've watched recently, but I would never critique it just because it's just a miracle that it got made. And that miracle unto itself should be celebrated. I think that, there's art is also so many different things to so many different people that the fact that people are enjoying Sandman means that they did something right if the point is entertainment value. And if I'm watching something for kind of a metaphysical experience, I'm probably going to not get that from, a Harry Potter book or a Sandman TV series or Game of Thrones or any of that kind of stuff. But the biggest thing that I just wanted to say was that, there are things about it that I understand why they did what they did. There's a lot about it that I really, really think they did great. And then there's other things that might have not resonated with me, but part of that is because we have such intimate relationships with the subject matter, and my version of anything, Sandman or Hellblazer, John Constantine, or although I did like Joanna Constantine in the show, but any of that stuff I mentioned that. The reason I mentioned Hellblazer is because I was so disappointed with the Constantine movie. because I loved John Constantine as a character so much. And then, I don't know, maybe 5 years later, I wound up watching it just kind of because it was, I don't know, it came up on a streaming thing, and I really loved it. So watching it without having my heels dug in about loving,
Mhm.
you know, this specific character that was in my head and loving these graphic novels so rabidly and just being like, man, Keanu Reeves was a great character. They made a great film. Um, so, different things for different people at different times in their lives. And, uh, you know, I have my inner cattiness that of course will always come out. That
So as
I
far as,
do.
sorry, what was that last thing you said?
I said, but I try to temper it with gratitude. Like, I think it's really amazing when anything gets made. That, like, it's such a hard thing to even imagine the hurdles that things jump through. And,
Right.
You were
Well,
going to ask me a question.
I was going to say that's another. I found a practical nugget in there, which is keeping expectations realistic.
I wouldn't even say realistic. Just like if it's different things resonate with different people at different times.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
I think that um, that television is the hardest medium. I think it's harder even than film. I think
Mhm.
because you've got these extended narratives and that's a whole other conversation. But and so many people in the boat, like
Yeah.
thousands and thousands of people trying to work in alignment. Like it's just not, it's rare that you get a really singular vision. Like everything gets homogenized just through the process. Meaning if you look at the cinematography, everything starts to look the same. But it's
Mhm.
because of the hurdles that it needs to jump through. But that's why something like Better Call Saul or Breaking Bad stands out and everybody talks about it. And it's because it's a rare, rare, rare thing.
Yeah, totally.
Someone mentioned Henry Darger, and Henry Darger is a really great example about art for the sake of creation. But man, talk about someone that probably had no communication skills. That guy was a janitor and just drew obsessively in the basement, and that's what happens with it.
So since getting to the end here, I just wanted to ask what has been your favorite collaborative experience? We kind of started talking about Sandman, but
um,
I'm
my
curious.
favorite collaborative experience. I'm gonna pick. Uh, I have two. One one would probably be in the long-term sense, Gail Pataki, just because we've been just like conjoined twins for decades.
Mhm.
And I love what she does so much. Um, and she's such a good person. And she feels things so deeply and so strongly that to be able to help her in a management kind of way has been really important to me. And a big part of those conversations have been moving away from what does success mean? Is it emotional or is it commercial? And kind of trying to unpack some of that, in terms of, really what the bigger picture thing is. But in terms of like things that I was working on, I think that the favorite collaborative experience that comes to mind quickly is Mr. Johnny Lips,
Mm,
John
yeah.
Lipishak. I need to find out how these people pronounce their names. I just say them.
Johnny
Uh,
Lip.
And the reason is because, like, working with people like Aaron has been rewarding, working with Rob Bolter has been rewarding. But the thing about the reason I'm mentioning John Lipishak, John is the VFX artist that worked on Aurora, which is a short film that we made. And what happened is we'd made this rubber monster suit for this Twilight Zone episode kind of thing. Genesis Peorage was the voice of the creature, and Brahm did our costume designs, and Dave Mckean did our movie poster. Like, it was kind of like the Jodorowsky's Dune of short films. And so I was trying to find someone to do these visual effects where I wanted the creature's eyes to blink, to move. I wanted the eyelids to move. And to do that practically would have cost an extraordinary amount of money. But the idea was, we kind of let it go and thought, well, maybe digitally we can make this work. And what happened was I was speaking to some really extraordinary digital VFX people. And they were telling me, well, you need to get the head, and we need to shoot it on a green screen, and we got to put tracking on, and they came up with all of these things about how expensive it was going to be, how long it was going to take. Oh my gosh, this is going to be a problem. Do you think we can do this? Like, all of these things. And in the course of that, one of the young men who physically created the costume for the film just did it. And so I get this video, and the work is done. And what he did is he went in old school style and rotoscoped and did all of it manually, and it looks amazing. There's another thing in there where it makes the spines on his back flicker. Same thing. Couldn't do it with physical effects. We added it in digitally, and he just knocked it out of the park. And what I liked about working with him is that he had the idea of, if I can imagine it, I can do it. And so instead of immediately putting it at arm's length and saying, well, there's these problems, we're going to have to do this, this, and this, he just immediately got into it. How do I do this? And the fact that he did it so quickly and so thoroughly is why I've been working with him on a lot of things, just because he's such a joy to work with and such a great problem solver, and just a really good person. And Aaron texted me the other day something about a VFX show about Industrial Light and Magic, which did all the Star Wars effects. And I guess what happened is that George Lucas hired people that hadn't. Oh, John's here. Hi, Johnny. He hired people that hadn't worked in VFX before, because he didn't want people who had a preconceived way of doing things. He wanted people that didn't know what technically shouldn't be able to be done.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my experience with Mr. Johnny Lips, as I call him, is
The
that
solution.
he didn't know that it was supposed to be hard, so he just did it. And there's so much poet, and Aaron's here too, and there's so much poetry in that. He didn't know how hard it was supposed to be, and he just knocked it out of the park like that, like nothing. And so to me, that's such a magical and creative energy. It's just being so plugged into creation. And the thing is, and Aaron and John and I and our friend David have been working on a movie for, God help us, a couple years at this point. And coming back to the creative relationship thing, it's like the reason that I'm working on that movie is because these are people that, even if we weren't making a movie, I'd want to be around them.
Mm-hmm.
Like 85% of what Aaron and I talk about aren't stuff we're working on. It's, it's like, it's a joy to have his brain present. And same thing with John, same thing with David, like, these are just good people, and it makes it rewarding. And so then when you're watching the thing that you have tried to bring to life enter the world, it's not a relief that you don't have to deal with those people anymore. It's a joy, it's a celebration of these relationships and of these creative things. So I didn't really give anybody as much. I guess I thought I'd give more practical advice in
I
terms of,
really disagree. I think there's so much practical, experience and wisdom in that. And Deshazia
it is the same. It is the same
cracking
green
me
cup.
up with these names, these nicknames. And I believe this is Deshazia. If I'm misremembering, please forgive me. But this has been awesome. Thank you guys so much for being here.
We ran 5 minutes over.
I'm cutting you off.
And
All right,
yeah,
guys.
thank you guys for being here. It's very funny that I was talking about John and that he was here. I had no idea.
He's right behind me, isn't he?
Thank you guys to everybody that was here.
Yes, thank you all so much. This has been fantastic. Again, I just wanted to remind everyone, you can reach out to us via the email address salon@centuryguild.net. We do check it if you have any ideas for upcoming topics or anything in particular you'd like to hear, or if you have feedback for us, please send us an email. We are all about connecting and making this a thriving creative community, so please don't hesitate. I also wanted to make an announcement. We just launched a Kickstarter today. I'm sure all, if not most of you, are familiar with the Dance of Death American release poster. We are now offering it as a deluxe, beautiful t-shirt. And so
What makes it deluxe?
It comes with a homunculus.
It comes with a homunculus.
Just, a lot of t-shirts. I'm very particular about my t-shirts, and I'm just it's not a sales pitch, but it's I like the ink to feel soft. I like it to feel like almost like a vintage t-shirt, and we put a lot of thought into this, and it's just a really cool like a vintage feel cotton t-shirt, and it's going to have the Dance of Death artwork on it. Check out the link in the description if you want to know, if you're not sure which Dance of Death poster it is, but it's available now. If you pre-order it, you get a discount. And if you're coming to the Oddities Flea Market in LA on October 8th and 9th, you can actually pick up your rewards there. We will have them. You can say hi to me. And yeah, it'll be really fun. But check out that link, and that's all for me. I could just keep going.
All from me.
Yeah.
All right, first Thursday of every month.
We'll see you next month.
And thank you guys. Thanks so much for being here. And
yes, thank you. We'll see you next month.
Yeah, we need a closing. No.
Here, I'll give you our closing. That's all, folks. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.